Salams, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast hosted by the CAIR Youth Advisory Council. I'm Sophia Bay, and I'm here with
Suhaila Abdi.
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Muhammad Khan.
And today our conversation is going to be about faith during difficult times. And we're basically just going to be talking about how we define faith, what it looks like to us, how we deal with our faith during difficult times, some things that we might think are really important to share to others that we should be talking about. So I think the best way to start is with a question, and I think we should first start with defining what faith looks like and means to us. And I'll give that question to Mohammed. He can start us off.
Okay, yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. As I said, I'm Muhammad, and let's start off with the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of faith. Like, what is faith to everyone? And the dictionary says belief and trust in and loyal to God, which, yeah, I agree with. It makes complete sense, belief and trust in God. That's how we define faith as Muslims as well. But to me, faith is a bit more than just like the belief and trust. Islamically, we also have to do more than just believe and trust. Like, yes, that's a bare minimum. That's what makes you a Muslim. But there's a bit more, practice, prayers, fasting, all those things. And I feel like when we're talking about faith in difficult times, those all fall into faith because as you get more nitpicky with like prayer, nafil, sunnah, you're getting more and more into like it's easier and easier to fall into the difficulty of it. So that's what faith means to me, especially in like this sense. Anyone else has anything to add?
Yeah, no, I feel like you said that pretty well. I feel like my definition kind of similar to yours, but I feel like my definition really agrees with like the fact that you're kind of just always trusting the process and never giving up. Because I know whenever we have like a difficulty, we make dua, but then we don't kind of keep that consistent. We think, oh, Allah didn't answer our dua for that one time that dua is done. So it's kind of also trusting along the process, but not giving up and giving that sincerity to Allah that even though it didn't answer that one time, you still continue during those difficult times.
Yeah, I think Suhaila, you both made really great points. And I think especially when we're talking about Islam, it's really about like the implementation of your beliefs. So the implementation of your faith, like that is, like Muhammad said, the bare minimum. And we also talked about like Suhaila said, trust the process. So like always having trust in Allah, like during those times, like no matter what. And I mean, obviously it's super difficult. It's very much so easier said than done. But like, that's good to know that we all have a similar understanding and kind of definition of faith. And just going based off of what you both said already, I think a good question to kind of get the conversation really rolling is how has the pandemic affected your faith, or do you think that the pandemic has affected either of your faiths just in general?
Yeah, I can start with this one. So for me, back in like March, April time, when it was like first starting, it was a pretty big hitter because like I would go to the masjid for Jummah every Friday, skipping school or going with my school friends to Jummah, and then all of a sudden that was just like taken away from me. So like that, it like made a mental block in my brain. Like it was like it's something hard to explain, but just like mentally, I was just like, whoa, like what is happening? And then as time went on, it started like Ramadan and all that. Couldn't go to the masjid during Ramadan, so for me, the pandemic really did. It was like probably the most difficult time for my faith. Um, I just I just lost all my mojo. I lost everything. The ball stopped rolling. So for me, the pandemic was really like a mental block more than anything else. Like I could have just prayed at home, and that's what I was like trying to do. But for some reason, it was just like I didn't have the community of people around me, like my Muslim friends at school. Like, oh yeah, let's go pray, and then I'd remember, oh yeah, I haven't prayed yet. So things like that, and then that stopped happening. So it was like I like lost my groove a bit. But then as the pandemic became more normalized, it made more of like sense. Like this is my everyday life now. So that it did take a toll on me, I'd say. Long story short.
Yeah, I feel like kind of same thing with Muhammad. I feel like my Dean kind of dropped drastically. I feel like every week, I was always at Friday halaqas at the masjid. I was surrounded with people who hosted events at the mosque. And now that all that was taken from me, I feel like I was kind of stuck in between that. So I feel like I was really just holding on to like nothing. And I feel like the pandemic really messed me up.
Yeah, I think both great answers. I think for me personally, at first, so when I looked at the pandemic, obviously, like we're still in the middle of it, but when I look back at the beginning and at the first couple of months, I was like, I was really struggling too. Like it was just, I was like, oh my God, like me and my friends, like Muhammad, like you said, like Sahila, like you said, we'd be at the mosque at Friday, at Jummah, at the events that we'd host on Friday sometimes for like the youth and youth groups and everything. And having that just come to a complete halt out of nowhere, it was just very um, disheartening, I guess. And, but I realized that that had a toll on my faith for sure. But then something that kind of refueled my faith and myself was being around my family all of the time, while like we were in quarantine and lockdown, because me and my family, we're very busy people. Everybody's going to school. I have at the time, like right before the pandemic started, my siblings went to school in Connecticut. I went to school in Holyoke. My mom worked in Chicago. So we were like, everybody was always out of the house. Like we would never really be together that much at the same time. But having the pandemic happen, we all were able to always be together. And we do things like Holy Quran sessions where we'd sit down and we'd read Holy Quran together or go over Hadith and stuff like that together. So that was something that kind of refueled my faith and allowed me to stay, like, kind of get that feeling back. Like when I would be at the mosque with my friends, instead of that, I'd be sitting in my living room reading Holy Quran or reading stories of the prophets with my family. So that really helped me during the pandemic. But it was a shift. It was a shift from like, okay, I'm going to be at the mosque doing this stuff to I'm going to be home with only my siblings, who sometimes can get annoying doing that stuff. I don't know, but I think that was like, it definitely affected, but kind of found ways to recreate the feelings that you would feel at the mosque with the community that you have there. I guess another question. So having said like some of the things that I did in order to like restore my faith and such, speaking specifically during the pandemic, what are some of the things that you both did or went through or realized during the pandemic to kind of fix up your faith and help you with it?
Yeah, so for me it started off rough, and then as I realized, like it had been a couple months, then like the summer came and all that. So I had realized that this is going to be my normal life for quite a bit of time. So when that kind of like clicked in my brain, it kind of made more sense to me. Like, well, if this is just going to be a long-term thing, then don't lose your faith for a long-term amount of time, because if this goes on for years, then you're going to be like facing years of punishment in the next life. So why would you sacrifice these moments just because they're a little bit harder than they were before? So after that, I kind of like got into my mojo again. Like, okay, this is normal, so I have to make it so that my routine, there's a new routine basically. Like before, I was praying at school, like right before school ended, but now I can pray right when like the prayer time starts because I really don't have anything to do anymore. So it was after that like clicked in my brain. It made it a lot easier, speaking pandemic specifically.
Yeah, I feel like I can agree upon that. I feel like the beginning of the pandemic, it was really hard to transition. But I feel like I could have said like it was probably the best Ramadan spending pandemic at home, surprisingly, right? And then like Eid, like it was fun staying at home. But I feel like the pandemic really taught me how sincere I am to Allah. So I'm not praying at the masjid in front of everybody. Everybody's watching you see if you pray your sunnah and all that. Now you're just trapped in your room and Asr came on. Now you have to pray knowing that's just between you and Allah. So I feel like it really pushed me to be more sincere towards Allah. And then, everybody transitioned from Zoom. So there were more events. I feel like I attended a lot of like Zoom events. So I could have like tuned in from a Halakha all the way from the UK or from Seattle, Washington. So I feel like, Zoom also played a role and I was like able to kind of tune into anything. So I feel like the pandemic definitely helped with my Iman. I feel like now I'm more sincere with Allah. And I feel like, again, we can all agree that with the pandemic, it really shows that just a simple thing like the disease can really like test us all, whether that be our deen, but it really goes back to how sincere you are with the law and how are you with your prayers and stuff. So that is something I had to learn the hard way with the pandemic.
Okay, so there is a bit of some technical difficulties with the internet. The adventures of doing stuff over Zoom. But with the great points that were said before Wi-Fi is cut out and everything, we're gonna transition kind of into talking about faith during difficult times tied in with mental health and how that like affects us, and just again going on with the conversation that we were just having. So either of y'all can take the stage.
Yeah, I mean, I can start off. I feel like in terms of mental health, I think many of us can agree on mental health. For me personally, it kind of went downhill. Wasn't surrounded with friends. I know for me, it was my last year of high school, so it was not a great way for me to cut off and just end my high school year. So many can agree that it went from downhill. Um, but I feel like in terms of my mental health, it kind of reminds me of the story, and I feel like many of y'all know of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and how he kind of went through a depressive episode as well, in which he kind of didn't have revelation for 6 months, I believe, and that took a toll on him and his mental health. And I know every time when I went through, tough times in the pandemic, I kind of reflected upon his story, and how even our prophet, the most beloved one of all, he kind of went through a difficult time just like us. So it made me kind of go back to his story and kind of see like what did he do during his moments of not getting revelation. So of course, what he did, as we advised in the beginning of this podcast, is kind of going back to Allah and praying and making sure you trust in Allah in the process of making dua and saying, Allah, I noticed that the pandemic has taken a toll on me. My last year of high school is not the way I wanted it to end. I'm lonely. I'm not interacting with my friends. However, I trust in your process that whatever you plan for us is the best of plans. So I feel like that is something I really kind of remembered throughout the pandemic, that I trusted in Allah in the process, as we mentioned in the beginning, and also making sure that no matter what happens to us is what Allah wants. Our year could have ended any other way, but Allah thought this was the best way for us. And again, when we mentioned that even through the most difficult time of the year, we still were able to find ways to benefit. So I feel like even within that itself, I feel like it was a blessing for us in that pandemic. So I feel like many of us went through downhills in terms of our mental health, but we were able to find a way. So I feel like me reflecting upon Prophet Muhammad's story kind of gave me some hope. And I feel like some of us can agree with that in terms of that as well.
Yeah, so for me as well, mental health just went way down, way down. Uh, Probably one of my lower points of my life, and it wasn't just because like I couldn't see people, but it was like I wasn't going to like Sunday school, I wasn't going to the masjid, and I realized later that it was all related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not to like pull in some like random thing, but it really was because I realized that it was not because I wasn't seeing my friends at school. It was because I wasn't seeing my Muslim friends at the masjid. It wasn't because I wasn't like not in my classes. It was because I wasn't at Jumu'ah learning things like that. So it all came back full circle to me. And that's what kind of like sparked my mental health to go up. That when I realized that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what I'm going through right now, but he also knows that this is the best thing that could happen to me in the long run. And that's what kind of like got me back up onto my feet, because I was like lonely, but I was like I was just in a bad place. And then I realized, oh, okay, if I start praying again, I'll become happier. And that's exactly what happened. I started praying again. Then Ramadan came, started fasting. And then with Ramadan, all the celebrations that happened last 10 nights. So my faith went up and then my mental health went back up. So I guess my life advice would be, if you're feeling down, make dua, pray extra, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows, and he's written in your book long ago that this is what's going to happen to you, but he also knows that it will help you in the long run. So that's what helped me come out of that phase, basically, during the pandemic.
I think again, similar to what y'all both just said, like I'm just agreeing, snapping fingers. But definitely coming to terms with the fact, like from, I don't know, again, being reminded during the time, like from the start of the pandemic, even till now, that like Allah has a reason for everything, and Allah tests people in different ways, like whether it's with good, whether it's with sickness, whether it's with your wealth, etc. Like this was definitely a way for Allah to test like a lot of us. Just by listening to all of our stories, we can tell that it was obviously a test, whether good or but I mean, I think it's good to come to terms with the fact that like faith is something that fluctuates. I mean, a lot of people, I feel like a lot of people don't allow themselves to accept that. Like it's either you're a good Muslim or you're a bad Muslim. Like I think that's something that's like a conversation that needs to be addressed, especially like within our Muslim communities, because people are always so quick to judge. Or even like when we're talking about mental health, like again, I think it comes to a thing of, oh, this is a very like bogus idea, but like people, oh, if you have mental health problems or if you think your mental health isn't good, it's because you're not a good Muslim, or it's because you're not reading enough Holy Quran. When it's just like in reality, like mental health is also something that fluctuates along with your faith, and it's okay for them to fluctuate, because I mean a lot knew for us that it was going to fluctuate. Like Allah made that something that's going to happen. So it's just like as it fluctuates, has its lows, it's going to have its highs. Like Allah said, with every hardship comes ease. So Allah knows that there's going to be hardship for you, but there's always going to be light at the end of the tunnel. Um, and it's really encouraging and hopeful when you know, like you can read the Holy Quran and there's certain verses that you read that are giving you hope for your tough times. And kind of just helping you through that, like Holy Quran, Hadith, etc. And also similar to what I think was said before, um, is like having something that for me at least, that helped me was having like people around me who I knew could help not just with my faith but also with my mental health, because I think they do go kind of hand in hand, um, along with other things. But like when one is low, the other one is usually low. Like it's, there's always a way to help uplift those both at the same time. But definitely having like surrounding yourself with people who share the same ideologies as you, share the same like practices and like thought processes and stuff. I think that helped me a lot, having my friends, being able to talk to them about, oh, well, today I'm kind of feeling this way, or, I struggled today. I need to go read some Holy Quran or something, or I think that'll help my situation right now if I'm not feeling like the strongest in my faith, or etc. Or even like, having a therapist to talk to or whatever, like, making sure you have those resources and setting yourself up to be able to help yourself in whatever way is best for yourself, is a good thing, which I think is also something that at least I discovered throughout this pandemic, is like learning myself more, learning what is good for me, what helps me, the things that I need to keep around me in order to keep my faith good, my mental health good, and all that good stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, and just to add on, or I guess agree to what you said, for me as well, it was realizing that every difficult time is a test, and that's supported by so many verses in the Quran. Surah Al-Mulk, I think it says like, He tests you with death and life. So He being Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, He tests us throughout our life and then throughout in the qabr as well. So realizing that this pandemic is just like a widespread test, like every Muslim's going through the same thing, right? So you have tests individually, like let's say a loved one passed away, that's like an individual test to me, and then a widespread test is something like the pandemic, that like a lot of Muslims are going through. So when I realized that other people were going through what I was going through, after like conversing with my friends, like, oh yeah, my mental health dipped too, oh yeah, my faith dipped too, that's what really helped me. So agreeing with you that having those like sources to talk to really helps not only you but sometimes the other person as well. So making sure that you're available when other people need you, but when you need people, that you have those resources. So yeah, I 100% agree that you need those friends, or you need that at least one resource that you can talk to.
Yeah, and I think it's I don't want to like we said already, like Allah tests people for in certain ways for certain reasons, but it's like when with every test you come out like a little bit stronger, which is good because it allows you to be able to be a resource for other people who need what you needed or who need what you had at the times when you were struggling. Um, and I think that's really really good. This might be something that we already touched on earlier in our conversation, but maybe a question is like, what are some specific things that like you both did or we all did in order to like hold on to our faith? And we're gonna have a whole conversation about mental health already. That's a whole different podcast, so we're not gonna talk about that the whole time. But like, what are some things that y'all did to like keep your mental health really well and also like keep your faith intact and in the way that you practice? What are some things like motivated us?
So for me, it was the placement of Ramadan in the pandemic. So like pandemic started and woo, mental health goes down. But then Ramadan came a couple months in, and it felt like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like planned this masterfully, which obviously he probably did, but it really felt like that. Like I saw it before my eyes because Ramadan is a time where everyone kind of just like elevates their deen, whether it's like once a year or whether it's like for your lifetime. It just always kind of starts off in Ramadan. So with that, I kind of like saw myself praying more. If I before maybe like in March, April, I was maybe praying 4 times a day, maybe missing Fajr some days. But in Ramadan, I was like 5 for 5, 100% every day. So it was like making sure that like the Ramadan was basically what lifted me up. And then reading the Quran, but also understanding the Quran was another thing. So during the pandemic, like, yeah, I can read a juz in like a week. Yeah, that's normal. But understanding what you're reading, that really helped me. I did that for the first time in the pandemic, basically reading an English Quran, reading tafsir, and then going to like tafsir classes, as Sohaila mentioned, like on Zoom with like people from across the country. We were all just like talking and doing tafsir of the Quran together. So that really helped me, like understanding what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying with these words. It takes everything to another level Quranically. So yeah, that really helped for me, definitely in Ramadan and then the English Quran and the tafsir.
Yeah, I agree as well, like kind of utilizing our time during Ramadan and Zoom events. But I feel like one thing that really helped me is, again, you mentioned Sophia, is being surrounded with family. I feel like being with family now, we were able to sit around and pray Jumu'ah together. We would also kind of also pray Salat Eid together. Sometimes our dad would just kind of tell stories about the Prophet. And I feel like because of family, we were able to kind of come together. And of course, with our dean, it talks about how much our family is important to us and stuff. So I feel like that really kind of played a role for my family and as well as for myself because now, I have my dad leading our prayers and stuff. So I feel like that was also a great push for during the pandemic because again, my family now we're all like so busy. Like mom's at work, dad's at work, kids are at school. So I feel like that is something I utilize the importance of family when it comes to Dean. So that is something I've learned as well.
I'm just gonna say same again because so what both you said is the exact same thing. Reading the Holy Quran for sure, like without a doubt, especially in English. Um, really like creating that relationship with the Holy Quran was a big thing. Not just for me, but also for my family because we'd be like, everybody needs it. Everybody's obviously feeling the same type of way. Like you get to a point like, well, at least for us, like we got to a point where it's just like, okay, like we've been in the house for a month already. Like this is gonna kind of so you just like everybody needed that boost of something. So like starting the new habits of like, okay, so for this month or this week, we're gonna read the Holy Quran together, whatever, read these surahs. Um, and also another thing for me that I did personally was reading the stories of the prophets. And being out like when you read them, you're able to relate because every single prophet had some type of test, some type of struggle. So you're able to relate. Like it might not be the exact same, but you're like, oh shoot, like some of them you can be like, oh, this prophet, they're during their time, like there was a plague or there was this or there's something. You're just like, I can relate to that. And you watch, like you read the story and we're also taught the stories of the prophets, but you see like how obviously we're not prophets, but how like they were able to overcome it, like, and you know that like Allah said, every hardship does come ease. We'll be able to overcome, inshallah, like whatever happens. So that was also a really big help for me. um Listening to lectures during Ramadan, Omar Suleiman, during Ramadan and outside of Ramadan. Omar Suleiman, oh my goodness,
Yeah, a
like
lot of
that
good
was,
stories.
I looked forward to all of his videos every single day. I was like, oh my God, yes. And this year he did the series about Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and his life. Oh my God, I was stuck every single day. I was like, okay, like when is it gonna come? What time did he released them like 6 o'clock every day or something? I was like, okay, this is what we're doing. Put it on the big screen. That's what we're watching. So that just really helped. Things like that. Similar to what you all both said, like having those resources and stuff. And of course making them habits that I can hold on to even after the pandemic.
Yeah, his series were lit. I'm not gonna lie.
Yes.
Especially
Oh my
the
God.
Angels one. The Angels ones were pretty good.
The one about Angel Jibrail. Oh my goodness. I was so in love. Like that was, I was just like, oh my God, this is so good.
Shout out to Yaqeen Institute.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And even like, I mean, as we, I believe, maybe start to finish up our conversation, like resources that were used, like not just for faith, but also for mental health, like they're definitely a big one, like the with whether it's articles or videos, they have a lot that they contribute and that people can utilize, for sure.
So our last question is, what is something that someone can do if they're going through a difficult time right now? Like, if what is something that they can do? What is one thing that you guys would recommend they do? And I'll pass it on to Sahela first.
Yeah, I think with that question, I feel like one thing that comes to mind is how our masjid is always a home for us, right? There are people in that place, whether they're deans or they're very religious people there, to people who are on the same level as you. You will see people at the masjid on all types of levels of their Iman. So I feel like going to the masjid, whether that be talking to anybody, whether that be the Iman of the masjid, there's always somebody at the masjid there for you. I know for me, there was one time, little story time, very quick one. There was this one time where I was also experiencing times where my deen was fluctuating. And it was Jum'ah, in fact, and I was praying. And there was actually a lady within the same row as me, and she kind of noticed that I was in a very sad mood. So she kind of talked to me, and she kind of talked about some stories of the Prophet. And she also talked about how within her age, she also kind of experienced times where her deen fluctuated. She had doubts and all that. But basically, what I want to say is that she was there for me and she was able to kind of drop some gems for me. And she also wanted to highlight mainly that the masjid is a home for you, and there are people all over the masjid here to help you and support you. So whether that to be the imam or people just praying and leaving or going, she kept highlighting that the masjid is a home and a place for everybody. So what I'll recommend is really going to the masjid and just kind of talking to somebody, because I will guarantee that somebody there would love to stop and just listen to you. So that would be my very first advice, that the masjid is always a home and a place for everyone.
Yeah, I 100% agree, that like anyone at the masjid, that my personal masjid that I go to, anyone would be happy to talk to. So I 100% agree with that. Um, and adding on to that, if you know someone who's going through a difficult time, reach out to them. Don't wait for them to come for you, to come to you. Reach out to them, because like when you're going through a difficult time, and I think everyone can relate to this, you kind of like feel like you're in your own personal prison. Like you're going through this difficult time, don't burden anyone else with your problems. But realistically, everyone that your friend, your family, anyone and everyone is waiting for you and will be supportive of whatever you're going through. So definitely, if maybe you're not going through a difficult time, but if you know someone who might be, reach out to them, make sure they're doing okay, because that check-in can go a long way. Um, and then one thing that I personally like to do is, back right when I started high school, I went from an Islamic high school to a public high school. So my dean went dipped down because I wasn't like surrounded with Muslims. I was surrounded by non-Muslims now. So if you're in that specific situation, or if you're not, this is just some good advice that I have. Join a youth group, because having those minds like yours at the age that you are, having those minds and having those voices is a big thing, because I 100% recommended it to all my friends that were going through the same thing as me. Going into a public high school, I said, dude, go into Sunday school, go into my Sunday school. I know it's a bit of a drive, but trust me. And they literally texted me the other day. They were like, yo, I'm so happy you told me to do that those years ago. So 100%, I totally would suggest going through a youth group or like halaqas at the masjid, if that's something that your masjid does. So definitely like finding those voices, and that's one way to do it.
My advice would be, it's kind of basically just like the basics, the same advice that my two great co-hosts gave. And also like keeping good company for sure is a really big thing. Obviously, like during the heat of the pandemic, we couldn't really do that, but now things are becoming a little bit more lenient. So like meeting up with your friends, like, you know, when you keep good company, like people say like you are the people who you hang around or whatever. I don't know what the phrase is exactly, but keeping good company is a really big thing. Also having tawakkul, which is like the reliance on Allah, and knowing that like Allah is there for you, like you can, he's always somebody that you can turn to. um, and also having taqwa as well, so being God conscious all of the time. So these are things that they might not just come so naturally. So these are habits that you're going to have to continuously practice and implement. And of course it's going to be a little bit harder because it's not going to be something that just comes so easily. You know, faith is it's easy when you make it easy for yourself. So these are things that are, it's going to have to be important to you, to take these steps. And when you walk towards Allah, he runs towards you in return. So always having those as a foundation, making sure that along with your faith, you're keeping your mental health good, being clear headed, being nice to yourself, being kind to your own person, to who you are, and to those around you. Those all have effects on your faith. So doing those things, definitely going to the mosque when you can. Some mosques are opening up now, so that's really, really exciting. Um, yeah, and always being conscious of how you feel. Like don't let yourself get too like down too bad before you address how you're feeling. Being self-aware is really important as well. And I think that might be all of my advice. You guys both gave really good answers, so I was just adding on to that.
Yeah, totally agree with what everyone said throughout the podcast and with this last question. So, unfortunately, I know that you guys are probably very sad, but this is where we end our episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. But before we end, there's a couple of things. First of all, if Omar Suleiman, if you're hearing this on the off chance, we'd love to have you as a guest speaker. So hit us up. We got you. We'll do an episode with you gladly. Um, but in all seriousness, we're not professionals. We're just some youth advisors in a committee that are just trying to put our voices out there. So if we said anything that maybe didn't strike a chord with you or it rubbed you the wrong way, please forgive us. We're not professionals. And if you really are in a difficult time and you really are in a bad mental space, we recommend seeing a professional. It's very important. And with that, we're gonna link all our sources on our webpage that this is on. So when this episode is out, hopefully, we remember to link the sources that we have. They're great links. You can do more research on it. On those links, that's a great gateway. But with that, I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please come back for the next episode. And Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum.